Social media, it is vexed in the home and in the office. A case brought by Antoinette Lattouf against the ABC has once again brought into prominence the issue of employers taking action against employees for breaching the employer's social media policies. So what are some of the legal and non-legal issues involved in all this? Well, to tell us more, Joy Depour from employment law firm People and Culture Strategies joins me now. Joy Depour, welcome. Really good to see you there. It feels as if, we've seen this playbook before. So why do you think we keep finding ourselves back at this point where there is, misunderstanding, a misreading of how employers expect employees to deal with social media?
Yeah, good morning, Nadine. Look, I think it's one of those issues that is going to continue to be vexed. I think that's the word that you used. If we think about why it is so vexed, we can reflect on a few things: the proliferation of social media, the different platforms that are there, the fact that it is now seen as a very important platform for individuals who are wanting to promote their views or express their views. Leave aside the social aspects of social media. And so you have individuals who are absolutely using, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Twitter, whatever it might be, as their platform for influencing, for the expression of their views. Now, that's all well and good if those individuals have no accountabilities or responsibilities to anyone else. And of course, what we know from this particular case, what we know from the Israel Folau case a number of years ago, is that where this issue becomes most complicated is where that conduct is occurring by an individual who is an employee at an organisation where what they are putting out on their social media platform or platforms might sit at odds with what that employer expects by way of statements to be made or not made, what that employer might stand for, or just a straight out breach of what that employer's social media policy is. So it's really interesting, without commenting on the specifics of that, the current ABC and Lattouf case, it strikes me as being extremely similar to the issues that were ventilated in the Israel Folau case a number of years ago.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Joy Depour, but I do think you were involved in that Israel Folau case. So wasn't there, in that one in particular, real freedom of speech issues at play?
Well, that's right. And this is often the biggest argument that is made in defense of someone who is the individual who has supposedly breached the employer's policy or possibly breached the employer's policy. And they say, well, look, I'm just expressing my genuinely held opinions. And that's certainly what was argued in the Israel Folau case. He wasn't commenting on rugby. He was expressing something about which he held a very deep and genuine view in relation to his religious beliefs. And he did so not just because he asserted that there was a right to free speech, but because he actually felt that he had a responsibility to promote that particular message, and social media was the way that he chose to do it. But what we need to understand and appreciate that as many US TV crime shows and things that we like to watch, and legal and courtroom dramas that we like to watch, there's no right to free speech in that unqualified sense here in Australia as there is to a greater extent in countries such as the US. Our Constitution does not say that all Australians have a right to free speech and can say whatever they want about whatever they want on social media or wherever else. There's no such right that exists. So for a lot of people who are operating under this mindset that there is that right to free speech, they are mistaken. Instead, what employees do have, as a general rule, will be an obligation to comply with whatever policies their employer has in place from time to time. Now, what the other issue that flows from this, of course, is it reasonable for an employer to have a social media policy that might be very expansive and might prohibit any kind of commentary by an employee on any matters? And we know that the reality for a lot of employers is that they're using social media for the promotion of their own brand, their own content, their own products. So I'm sure if their employees are using social media to promote those things, they're not going to get into trouble. So this is where the tension really starts to become very live.
So you're saying essentially that it is reasonable to have social media policies in place. Would you also say, being pragmatic, it is required now because, as you point out, social media is a very big strategic tool in the chest for companies to use to promote their own businesses. You know, where does the separation come between personal brand and public brand?
Yeah, exactly right. And so, yes, absolutely, employers need to have these policies, because the one thing that you can say with certainty is that if an employer takes action against an employee because of a particular social media post that they've promoted or published, in the absence of a policy, that dismissal is going to be found to be unfair in most courts and tribunals. So you need to have that policy as an employer to say, well, look, we made it quite clear what the conduct was that we expected of the particular employee, and indeed all of our employees. But to the point about where is that boundary, I think this is where employers are probably not engaging with this issue as actively as they need to. So they're probably rolling out a fairly standard template policy, relying on that policy, assuming that policy is going to be fully understood, but they're probably not having any active engagement and dialogue with their employees, particularly those employees who might tend to be a little bit more active in social media. Well, it's very interesting where an employee might be wearing a couple of different hats. So they might have a couple of casual roles, for example, for different employers. And one might be very happy for them to promote things on social media. And you never know. One thing that might be okay from one employer might not for a different employer. And those standards can differ organisation to organisation, as you say, Nadine, because different employers want to embrace social media to different extents.
Now, okay, so that is what employers need to do. If I'm an employee, what do you suggest? I mean, how cautious do we need to be? What is the best strategy to ensure that you're not breaching or crossing any boundaries?
Well, I think employees, first and foremost, should be familiar, make themselves familiar and aware of whatever their employer's policy is. Now, at the end of the day, employees won't necessarily like a lot of policies that their employer has, and that's always been the case and will probably continue to be the case. If an employee has a real problem with an employer's policy, then that's something that they should be discussing. It's probably unlikely that they're going to get a change made to the policy, but at least that employee may be able to put themselves in a position where they've made their position clear. That's not going to guarantee them that they're immune from disciplinary action or termination of employment if they go down the path that's seen as being a breach of the policy, but at least that's something that can be done proactively. Certainly would never advise an employee to take matters into their own hands, say, well, I feel very strongly about this particular issue, and there's certainly a lot of issues in the world about which people can feel strongly right now, and I'm going to take matters into my own hands. I'm going to post it. I don't care what the consequences are, and if I get sacked or if action gets taken against me, I'm going to fight it because that's going to be so outrageous. Not the recommended approach. If that's a path that you feel very strongly about, you should be discussing that with your manager, you should be discussing that with HR or the People and Culture Department in your organisation proactively. Don't do it and then say, well, I'm going to justify doing it without having told anyone that I was going to.